Bench is tied it up. The Cincinnati Reds win the World Series in 4 straight. It was a sweep.
In the dirt, it's a wild pitch. Here comes Walker. The Reds win the pennant.
Larkins won the game.
That ball is fair. Cincinnati's ahead. 2 games to none.
Welcome, Joe Randa to Cincinnati. Adam Dunn has done it again.
Benzinger backing and calling. And the 1990 World Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds.
Marty, yes. This is Adam from Milwaukee. Hey, Adam, how you doing? I'm good. How are you? Good. Do you think Scott Chatterbox is a good player?
Dunn up there with the bases loaded, the outfield deep and around toward right, and the 1-0 on the way to the plate. Swung on, long drive, right field, and this one belongs to the Reds.
And a high drive, hit back into deep right field. Junior has just knocked the door down to the 500 club.
Benson's first home run is a walk-off winner. That ball had a family.
And De La Cruz is, oh my goodness, look at this kid run. My, oh my, that is a triple.
Matt McClain's first big league bomb.
Spencer Steer's first big league hit is a home run to straightaway center field. Joey Votto's done it again.
The pitch. Votto swings high in the air. Right field. Yes! He pointed to the dugout to say, I told you. That is Joey Votto's 315th career go-ahead ribby. Only Johnny Bench had more as a Red.
And I can't tell you how much it means to play in front of everyone here in Cincinnati as a Red. What a gift. What a tremendous gift. So thank you. Thank you.
I think I can speak for all of Reds country. Joey Votto, thank you.
High drive. Left center field. Racing back to the line. Bourgeois. The Reds are National League Central Division champions. In the air, left center field. Did he? He did. He did. Reds win. Win. Line into right field. Genius, the first Red ever with 4 home runs in a game. Can you believe it? In the air, down the right field line. Doesn't have a chance. The Reds have won on a 3-run home run on opening day by Ramon Hernandez. A strike away and out away is Homer Bailey. Ground ball to third. Frazier gloves. Throw to first, and Homer Bailey, for the second time in his major league career, has caused a no-hit. Oh, gosh. Are you kidding me? Holy Moses, the second player in major league history to hit 7 home runs in the first 10 games. In the air, and the Reds win. What a dream beginning to a career of Trey Bruce.
Well, well, well. What a day for the Cincinnati Reds. Welcome in, everybody. A special Friday night edition of Chatterbox Reds. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined as always by Nick Kirby, and I guess I'll call special guest Trace Fowler in the house. You know it's a big day when Trace joins us. Listen, I was getting ready to take my daughter to dinner. Nick texted me and said, holy, you know what? I said, what? I thought he was just talking about Joey Wiemer. Check Twitter, and wow. The Reds sending Jonathan India and Joey Wiemer to the Kansas City Royals in exchange for Brady Singer. Welcome in. Before we dive too deep into it, speaking of deep, want to thank our sponsor, Deep South Commodities. Nick, let's give DSC a shout out.
Yeah, shout out to Deep South Commodities. DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. Hi, Trace.
How's it going, guys? Here's my concern. One, I don't know if my internet's going to hold up out here in this garage. It's the only quiet space that I have currently in my house. Otherwise, if it's not going to, I don't have my computer set up yet from the Athletes in Action. I wasn't expecting, I wasn't expecting this, to be quite frank. I thought there was going to be, some non-tender stuff. Oh, are we going to keep Espinal? Are we not? Are we going to leave Espinal? Turns out Espinal just might be the guy. I mean, I don't know. I'm as always when we get on these, within the first few minutes, I'm trying to collect my thoughts as to what I want to say about all this. But I'm shocked. I guess I think I'm almost more shocked than I was when David Bell got fired, which was a pretty decent shock level. I just didn't see this going down, especially when there was like a little bit of smoke. A couple weeks ago. And then nothing happened. So you're like, all right, well, just like every Jonathan India trade. I mean, we've been doing this for 3 years. So I don't know. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I hate it. And I also don't know if I love it. I really don't know. Only thing I'm going to say really quickly before we get started, I think there's going to be people that are going to try to do the whole parade thing that Jonathan India got traded. And there's going to be some people that are absolutely over the moon pissed off, or I would say if you're on either side of those aisles, of course, you can fan however you want. I just don't think that's probably the proper way to go about it. I mean, India did give a lot to this organization. I thought he cared. And I also think that there's probably reasons as to why the Reds were trying to move him too. And we can all be somewhat rational here, I hope.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think we should acknowledge the fact Jonathan India, Rookie of the Year season, gave a lot to this city and was by all accounts a leader in the locker room. So you won't hear us bashing him on this show. We'll certainly give you some facts around his tenure and we'll talk about the move, but this isn't going to be a Jonathan India hate fest by any means. But before we get too much into it, Trace, we're already got a 50 bomb from our guy, Michael Rolfe. He said, is Trace laying down in front of a golf simulator? Does Trace have a mattress in his garage? I love C-Box. So, Trace, when you first joined, I saw the drywall going up. I thought you were fixing the wall in the basement, to be honest with you. No. I'm going to be brutally honest here. You look clearer than you've ever looked in the basement. You look great right now on the phone. Pictures holding up perfect. So, thank you, as always, to Michael Rolfe for his support and to everybody else who is joining us on this Friday evening. 320 plus in the stream already right now. Literally could not do it without you. So let's get into it. Let's get into
hold on. We got additional breaking news since we've gone live. Ian Jabot was just non-tendered.
Oh, that just never worked out. It never ended up panning out. We were so hyped and so hopeful, especially Elliott for his 2024 campaign. Just never got off the ground in 2024. And it seems to be never going to go back up. It's a shame.
Yeah. So a pretty eventful day for the Reds. Obviously today, the non-tender deadline announced earlier that they agreed to a deal with Santiago Espinal at $2.4 million, which is seeming,
bargain. I mean, it was projected. Yeah. He was projected at $4 million.
Yeah. So, significant deal there. Probably paved the way for the biggest news of the day. Obviously, again, if you're just joining us, the Reds have traded Jonathan India and Joey Wiemer to the Kansas City Royals for Brady Singer. So, Nick, we haven't heard from you officially yet on this. Let's get your initial reactions before we dive too deep into this deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been a guy that said I think the Reds still need more pitching even after Nick Martinez. So this is a good move for that. This is a legitimate piece that can help you in next year. This doesn't feel like that bargain trade that I was worried about with Jonathan India, where you're getting, pennies on the dollar back for him. I mean, this is a legitimate, bona fide, big league starter, league average, maybe a little bit better, but you can never have too many league average starters. And the Reds now have some substantial pitching depth. That really will, I think, help carry this team. So, yeah, I love the move. I love that they only had to throw Wiemer in. When we talked before, we thought it'd be Jonathan India. The Reds would have to throw in a prospect in. I mean, Wiemer was a guy that we liked, but didn't really feel like he was in the immediate plans. And if Wiemer has a bad 2025, he's probably getting cut. He's kind of on his last leg where he's at anyway. So, yeah, I mean, this is over on the surface without diving too deep. I think this is a really good deal for the Reds.
Yeah, important to remember. I mean, Brady Singer now 4 straight years of 24 or more starts, has surpassed 128 innings pitched in each of those 4 seasons. So he's going to bring stability. So, Trace, I'm interested in your opinion. Where do you see Singer fitting into the rotation today, given the pieces that are on this Reds ball club?
Well, the biggest concern I have, and I hope they don't do it because I think good organizations wouldn't do this, and it's a matter of what they do with Nick Martinez. It depends on where he slots in and fits in. If they're going to force him to be a starter because they paid him, then I guess that makes it a little more difficult to figure out where you're gonna fit Singer in. I would say he's going to be, probably middle of the rotation, back half. Obviously, I don't think it's up for debate who the top line guys are, and I'd also say that it gives you some flexibility with guys like Ashcraft now. I know that we're not out on Lodolo, obviously, on this room, but if Lodolo starts to struggle again or has somewhat similar issues of putting consecutive starts together, do you find a spot for him to go in the bullpen? I know we've pushed really hard against that in the past, but again, what Nick's saying is true, and what any good baseball team is going to do is to try to make sure you have as much depth at the hardest position to find, I might add. Like, that's the other thing that we have to understand is that from a dollar per dollar perspective, I guess second baseman has some value, but let's be honest as well, a corner outfield spot, which is something we've floated into the idea of what Jonathan India could be, it's just not that valuable. It's not going to be that much money on the free market. And we already seen what average MLB pitchers cost us, and Frankie Montas is a perfect example of that. It's kind of funny that he's kind of somewhat, I know it's not big, but he's somewhat of a part of this deal in a small way. But ultimately, I think more importantly than Singer where he slots in, I think it's basically a trust factor that the Reds think they figured out how to manage this infield. And I'll openly admit that's a gamble, and I hope it pays off. But Santiago Espinal and Matt McLean, you're looking right at it. And I mean, unless they go out and make another deal this offseason, that you cannot possibly be a pennant chasing team if one or two of those guys that I just mentioned aren't at least average or above average players in Major League Baseball. And that's the risk, because one thing Jonathan India was last year is he was our second best position player. And, his defense did get better, but ultimately, I think if anything, it just paints a picture around what this front office feels like they have as an infield, and hopefully they're right.
Yeah, 2 quick super chats. First, thanks to Stacy Myers. She said, can we just fast forward to March? Thanks for everything you guys do. And then a longtime supporter and friend, Ricky Logan, with a $5 super chat. He chimes in and says, Green, Lodolo, Martinez, Singer, Louder, and then question mark on Abbott and Ashcraft to the pen, question mark. Nick, where are you landing at with this right now in terms of the rotation and where it falls come spring?
Yeah, I was typing it out as you guys were talking to kind of put some pen to paper. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it'd be a massive mistake, and I don't think the Reds are doing it, but I know a lot of people believe they are. It'd be a massive mistake to say because Nick Martinez is making $21 million, he has to start. That'd be a terrible decision. I don't think the Reds will do it. So if everyone's healthy, we always know that's a massive if, especially with pitchers. I would say right now the opening day rotation would be Green, Lodolo, Abbott, Singer, and Louder, and Martinez would be in the bullpen. But Martinez there's like a 90% chance that Martinez is in your opening day rotation. There's a chance of all 5 of those guys being healthy at the beginning of the year is not likely. That's not how it works. Then you have Burns and Ashcraft as the outside, and then I guess Phillips. But I mean, that's 9 starting pitchers. The Reds used last year 11 starting pitchers. That's not counting the openers. That's not even counting the guys that they use as openers in the bullpen games. You're going to need all 9 of those guys at some point throughout the year. So I love that they have the pitching depth. That's really, I think, the Reds' bread and butter. And then they have a lot of upside offensively still. I still believe in a lot of these guys. They think every one of them is going to come back to earth, but I think there's going to be a few that are. I didn't see that upside with the pitching where you had other guys like I don't see Carson Spires being upside next year and, grabbing a roster rotation spot. Whereas I can see a lot more of the upside with offense, but the Reds payroll is still very, very small right now. I mean, I think we're still probably not even at 60 or 70 million with Singer. I mean, Singer, I think was 10 or 12, and the Reds just got rid of 5 for India. So this isn't adding that much salary. So the Reds should still have quite a bit of money to spend. They already said somewhere, Craig, I don't remember where, payroll's not going down. That was an actual quote, right? Yep. So they should still have $40 million to spend, and that's probably on offense and, maybe a reliever if there's a good fit.
Yeah, I think the exact quote was that we would be at or above 2024 level. So certainly expect some more signings. Just to touch on what you just talked about in terms of Brady Singer's contract, he's arbitration eligible for the next 2 years, so he's under team control until 2026. This past year, he made $4.85 million with the Royals. Spotrac has him projected at 7.5. I know that that's not necessarily always true, but 7.5 for a starting pitcher of his caliber is certainly a lot more valuable, at least in my eyes, than.
So they had $2 million. They had $2 million.
They had $2 million. Yeah, Jonathan India was under contract, I think, for $5 million for this year. So basically, added $2.5 million to the payroll in order to add a middle of the rotation starting pitcher that, again, we saw with Montas last year, is going to typically cost you twice as much as it's going to cost with Brady Singer. So, I mean, and to have him under control for 2 more years is certainly a big piece to this, I think, especially when you're talking about Martinez is a 1-year deal with the qualifying offer and everything else. So, look, I think when you're talking about this starting pitching and the injuries that they have gone through, Nick Lodolo especially, adding more pieces is going to be key. And even if that means that some major league caliber starters are in the minors to start it, I think that's a good problem to have coming out of spring training, to have to figure out who actually makes your rotation. Trace, you touched on it earlier, and I want to dive into it a little bit more. Obviously, the return on this was Jonathan India and Joey Wiemer. The fact that they waited for Espinal to sign today may have played a part in this. We started to see reports kind of leak yesterday that this conversation was happening. They announced earlier today that Santiago Espinal signs for $2.4 million. And again, you sign him for 2.4. McLean's already under contract. That $2.5 million difference between McLean and India just gets shifted over to Brady Singer, and you're essentially exactly where you would have been from a contract perspective anyway. But you brought up an interesting point, is that you're basically wishing on your lucky stars that Matt McLean is healthy coming into 2025. Traces, do you think that there's a need to add another piece to this infield going into 2025, even if it's like a vet on a low spring training invite? What's your approach to second base?
Well, if in order to win and you're the Reds, let's just be honest with ourselves here. They have to catch some breaks, and they have to take some risks and be right. And the question is where's this team going to take risks at? Are they going to take a risk that Matt McLean comes back and could possibly be the player that he was for much of the season of 2020? What would that be, 3 at this point? Or do they want to risk the idea of trying to go out into the market and find another, again, Singer type pitcher or Montas type pitcher and spend the money there and not give themselves enough leeway to maybe actually go out and get one thing we all as Reds fans want, that maybe if I could pitch this for a single second and tell everybody that's on the Jonathan India bandwagon to maybe they'll come back a little bit to the center, is that this gives the Reds maybe an opportunity to take all the payroll that they currently have and put it towards an outfield bat. Now, who that will be, it's not going to be Juan Soto. I don't know who it'll be, but it gives them at least a chance to spend not frivolously, but spend enough money to get a legitimate outfield bat when they're going to they decided, you know what, we're going to take a risk that we're going to get as much production out of Espinal and or Matt McLean to replace Jonathan India. We're going to add Singer as a depth pitcher, so we don't have to go out and spend 10, 15, whatever that would be, $20 million on a 1 or 2 year deal. Let's also remember, not many pitchers are going to come here on a 1 year deal for probably what I would call, like league average money. Like you're going to have to overpay a little bit for a guy to come in here for a single year. And then the last thing I would say is like, what is it that you value the most as a Reds fan? And I think personally, I'm at the point now where I would love the Reds to find a way to shore up this outfield above all things. Above all things, I'm tired of just the musical chairs or the lawn furniture or whatever Kirby always says. It's like we're just swapping these guys out every single year, and we're begging for a guy like Jake Fraley to be good. We're begging for a guy like Stuart Fairchild to be good. Let's face it, TJ Friedel's not a guarantee. The outfield of all of the positions is probably, or all of the areas that I think this team needs to probably shore up, it's going to be that.
Let me chime in on that payroll that you just flashed on the screen. That's not the accurate one. So there's two different ones. The smaller one that's 62 million. That's where they're at. The current payroll allocations. The other one is projection total. That's not when you see like payroll rankings. It's the smaller one. So it is currently at 62 million, whatever that number is. That's not what we're talking about with payroll. So the Reds ended at 96 last year. So you're looking at 34 million right now. I don't know when they said our payroll won't go down, if they were talking about the 96 or they were talking about the 104, which I think it was on opening day. The Reds cut a little bit when they got rid of Montas at the deadline. But, I mean, the Reds still have well over $30 million to spend. I mean, you can go get a third baseman and an outfielder that are pretty significant players for $30+ million.
And I want to add, too, like...
real quick, just to clarify, I think what they're saying is, yes, that 62 is what's currently, like, signed, but that's not including anybody that's going into arbitration. So if you add up, you've got 21 million for Martinez, 15 million to Candelario, 8 million to Pecan, 6.3 to Hunter Green, 5.5 now. Jonathan India is gone. Suter at 2.25.
I don't. We're in the weeds here, but I don't think that's accurate. I think it's around 60 right now.
Well, the baseline question is also, this is what I was going to say, is like, who has the best chance to completely outperform what you pay them? That's what the Reds are after. That's what essentially, not all teams, obviously there's certain teams that could care less about money. We know who those are. But the Reds are trying to find guys that are going to outperform what you pay them. And I think the fact of the matter is they looked at Jonathan India, even through arbitration, and you're not going to get a significant jump there in what you're paying him and what he's going to probably provide you wins above replacement. It's just not going to happen. I do think there's a chance that could happen for Santiago Espinal. I know that sounds that could sound ridiculously stupid. I get it by the All-Star break. And I also think there's a chance that could happen with Matt McClain. That's the baseline of all of this, that I would say, as stupid as this sounds, I don't care what Jonathan India does with Kansas City for the most part. And of course, I care a little bit what Singer does, but take that out of the equation. The real question about this, when I seen it, the real question is what happens at second base, and or hopefully maybe Noelve figures it out. But what happens in the infield that the Reds are banking on, for lack of a better term? Because let's just say Singer's above average, if not great. If Espinal and Matt McClain are terrible, people are going to be rightfully upset, and the Reds are going to be in a position where they're going to be in a spot they're not going to want to be again. So, we'll see where the chips fall where they may, but we've been beating the drum for a while on this podcast about maybe defense at some day will become a priority, and maybe today was the start of that.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, keeping Espinal and, trading Jonathan India, that's a decent indication. And I'm with you. I'm not, dancing on trading Jonathan India. I'm glad they waited and got fair value for him, because it felt like there was times where they could have made a move where they would have got less. And to be honest, I think if you had traded Jonathan India last season, I don't think you would have got this big of a return. I think he did increase his value some this year.
Before we continue, Nick, I want to take a second to recognize another one of our sponsors and remind everybody in the chat that it's okay not to be okay. Good friends at 988.
Yeah, if you purchased a Christmas gift with a Jonathan India jersey for someone, you may, want to use this hotline. So you always want to remind you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health, whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between. It's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
So, Nick, when the Reds first hired Terry Francona, one of the things that they talked about a lot was that he's not afraid to make trades. Obviously, early in this hot stove season, we're already seeing that come to fruition. But again, adding a guy like Brady Singer potentially opens up additional moves around starting pitchers to move them or otherwise. I assume that you can agree with me that this is probably not the last trade that the Reds make this offseason.
I would be pretty surprised if this was the last trade. It's not the last move, but I think there's still some pieces that could be, moved around. I think I had said earlier in the offseason, I felt like one of Steer or India would get moved, so I think Steer's probably safe now. But I do think that there's another piece or two that could absolutely get swapped. And it could be maybe not even the top flight players. It could be someone like a Will Benson or in that category that they just move for another piece that kind of fits. But I do think this will be a very active offseason for the Reds. And I would set the over under at 2.5 trades with major league players left this offseason.
Okay. So Trace, I'll ask you to put your GM hat on. Don't necessarily need names, but what is your focus moving forward as we go into winter meetings here in the next couple of weeks and as the Reds progress towards spring training? What are your priorities and what are you trying to acquire via free agency and what are you trying to acquire via trade?
Well, I think whether you acquire it via free agency or trade's the only way that this team's probably going to get what I would consider like a marquee name that maybe some would get extremely excited about. And I don't think to put it this way, that's not going to happen in the offseason. I hope I'm maybe wrong sometimes, but I would venture to say that there's a possibility of that depending on how the farm system continues to progress for the Reds, that they could do that at the trade deadline, depending on where they're at. If they find themselves in a pennant race again, I know that they kind of passed or they basically decided they wanted to kick the can down the road 2 years ago. I don't think they'll do that again. But as far as the offseason goes, to get back to your original question, I already said it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like they're going to have to get a legitimate bat in the middle of this lineup, and it's going to have to be either third base or it's going to have to be an outfielder. And I would venture to say I would really love it to be a left-handed bat as well, because ultimately I don't trust many of the outfielders that we currently have. Although I think they have it in them, I just don't think that they're consistent enough big league players to trust to be a part of a long season. And then the last question I guess I'd have for you guys is like, I personally, and I know everyone's going to hate me for saying this, I'm personally still not to the point where I'm willing to trade some of these prospects that we've glamored about for a while just to try to, I don't want to say appease the fans, but ultimately, like, I'd like to see if we have holes at certain spots. And I know, kill me. Ready for this one? I'm not sure we have a hole at third base. Like, everyone's acting like Noelvi Marte is completely dead. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on that too. I'm not saying that I want to go into opening day with Noelvi guaranteed a spot, but I'm also not going to sit here and act like I'm willing to move on from that and go out and trade one of my prospects for a third baseman. Because if let's just say, for instance, Candelario, I know he's a free agent, but if we would have traded somebody away to get Candelario, everybody would have been jumping for joy and excited about it. And now look at us. We don't even bring his name up to play third base right now, one season removed. So, things can change quickly for the better or for the worse. And I would like the Reds to stay away from selling prospects until the trade deadline to see what we actually need. Because we might think we need a third baseman, but we really need another starter. We might think we need a right fielder, which we do, but we might think we need a right fielder. And before we trade somebody that is of relevance for it, let's make sure of that. So that's my overall thoughts. I'm not going to get overly aggressive to try to make a move just because we think that we need to do something this offseason.
Super chat from Ryan Carroll. Just want to call it out real quick. Said, I think Jake McCarthy would be a great addition. The Diamondbacks are expected to be willing to move on from some of their outfield surplus, reportedly. So Ryan Carroll thinks Jake McCarthy would be a good addition. Go ahead, Nick.
I agree with Trace. Like, that's why I didn't want to go sign some third baseman that blocks Marte or anything. It'd be nice to bring someone in that could play third base, but also has the flexibility to move somewhere else if Marte pulls his head out of his ass. I mean, I don't really want him blocked because, like you said, Candelaria would have been the perfect free agent for the Reds if they were in the same spot last year as a guy that played third base. And 2 months later, it's he can't play third base anymore, and the Marte would probably still even be a better option. So I don't really want him blocked. Again, a guy like I've said several times, I think Alec Bohm, if the Reds could work a trade for him, he's only a couple more years and he can play first base as well. So it kind of gives you some flexibility there. I don't really want Spencer Steer having to play third base for a long period of time. I just think he's going to really get exposed if he's playing a premium position defensively. So I think you kind of have to bring someone in, but it's a tough spot of who you bring in and making sure you don't block Marte.
I think Espinal's that guy right now, to be honest. What you just said is Espinal. He's not a guy that's going to block Marte if he plays really, really well. Marte, I'm talking about. But he's also a guy that can move to second base if Matt McLain gets injured again. Matt McLain's also a guy, quite frankly, that could probably move depending on how things shake out. And the one last thing I just forgot to mention, our DH situation and or first base situation, one of the two. Now, I know CES was hurt all year, and I get that kind of muddied the waters a little. But, we got to have some better production. We can't be running Espinal out there as a DH, which never made sense, by the way. Never made sense. Was the world's worst thing honestly, if there's anything that David Bell did that I would say, hey, maybe that's why, you got to let him go. It's DHing Espinal was one of the all-time dumb moves I've ever seen.
Well, did it increase India's trade value enough?
I don't know, dude. I mean, if that's how it goes, and I guess it kind of can, because I'm sure maybe not every team's scouting, that extensively, but I just
he improved so much defensively. We had to DH Espinal because we couldn't pull him out of the field.
No, I'm not. Well, listen, I get it's funny, but I can't. I'm not even gonna entertain the idea that was ever a good idea. I will say I wish Jonathan India the best in Kansas City, and hopefully our second base situation will be a pretty positive one from a defensive perspective, and that might be Espinal. It also could be McLain. Espinal plays third base, and Noelve maybe at some point figures it out. I don't know.
Maybe I'm a little too just nervous here, but I kind of feel like I don't want Espinal having to cover two spots that he might need to cover both. Right? I mean that's kind of Marte doesn't figure it out. He needs to go to AAA, and then McLain gets hurt again. Espinal can't play two spots. I'm fine with Espinal being the backup, but there's a real possibility that you do kind of need two spots there.
Well, the only thing I would ask both of you is don't you agree with the Reds though? And if you were going to have to take a gamble and you're going to spend money somewhere, you're going to spend it on a corner outfielder perhaps, and a bat. That worst case scenario, maybe one of these guys in the outfield picks it up and you could at least DH that person. My point in saying that is that they are gambling on the fact that they're going to figure out between Espinal and or McLain that one of those guys is going to be rock solid. And then maybe, just maybe, between Santiago, McLean, and Noelve, 2 of the 3 are serviceable enough to play on a daily basis. That's what it seems to be.
Also worth mentioning, Tyler Callahan was just added to the 40-man roster and protected. A guy that has primarily played second base. The Reds had him split time in left field. Was a guy that I loved, but was a little bit surprising that they did add him to the 40-man roster. And now when you see India getting moved, it makes sense the track there that the Reds wanted to make sure they protected him and didn't let him get away. So I don't think he's in the opening day plans, but he is, at least, because I'm trying to think, there's not a whole lot of depth there. And Edwin Arroyo is still a little bit away, but he had a great year in between his big injury. He had a great spring, really looked impressive in the Arizona Fall League. So I guess there are 2 more legitimate options internal that a couple months ago we didn't really think were there.
Quick shout out, Michael Rolfe dropping a 20 bomb. He said, when do Fergie Fowler and I get our shot to do a live stream? I believe we could earn a ton of likes, make Nick very nervous simultaneously. P.S. Come to my dental practice in December. C-Box discounts, maybe a sponsorship soon? ? I'd say no free ads, but he paid for it.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Listen, Michael Rolfe. Michael Rolfe is not the definition of a free ad. My man is on the. He's almost taking care of the payroll here of Chatterbox Reds, at least on at least a 6-month basis. But point to Michael is yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm doing the best I can around the holidays here with Fergie. You know, she's asking for things. I'm trying to make sure that I figure out how to get those things sometimes. And then secondarily to that, she has a birthday that's like right next to Thanksgiving. It's really tough for me. I never really have liked that, because you're trying to balance, like, you want to celebrate the birthday, but it's the same day kind of as Thanksgiving sometimes. So it's like, I don't know. It's tough holiday season for your boy here. But anyway,
instead he's hiding out in the garage at the golf simulator, trying to get away from her.
Well, I was just building something in here. I was trying to work, and then all of a sudden my son comes in the garage. He's like, Nick's calling you. And I'm like, oh shit, what happened? So I get on there. I didn't even call Nick back. This shows you like where we're at right now. I literally went straight to Twitter, look at the notifications from the Reds, and I was like, holy crap, what's today's day? Shout out, by the way, we went to about 38 minutes without mentioning Evan, a loyal watcher of the show. This is basically Evan's day today. So congratulations to him. I'm sure he's blowing out candles and singing songs, but, I'm not advocating for that, but thankfully we don't have to see the all caps anymore in the chat about trading Jonathan India on a random May game when we all know he's not going to get traded. So I guess that chapter of Chatterbox Reds is over. That's kind of cool.
Evan's going to have to find somebody else to
advocate
for.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked a lot defensively about how the Reds replaced Jonathan India. I do want to remind everyone that he batted leadoff 105 times this past season. Nick, what's the leadoff? What a weird image that is. For those of you listening to the podcast on Saturday morning, Nick just put up a image of the Kansas City Royals tweet with Jonathan India in the royal blue. So we'll get that off the screen as quickly as we can. But Nick, what's the leadoff position look like for you in 2025?
That should be Ellie De La Cruz. Ellie De La Cruz should be leading off. He should be getting the most at-bats. Dodgers bat Shohei Ohtani first. Braves bat Ronald Acuna first. You don't waste this guy. I don't want anyone else getting an extra trip to the plate than Ellie De La Cruz. So Ellie's my leadoff hitter. I know that David Bell tried to ease him in at the beginning of the year last year, and I didn't really have an issue with that. But I think this is the perfect time to bat him leadoff. And I think Francona will. Francona batted Lindor leadoff in Cleveland, which is, a pretty similar comp to kind of where Ellie's at. So I think that's your leadoff hitter. You stick him there and you don't mess with him. Let him ride it out, ups and downs. He'll be fine.
And no one's in his way, too. Like, that's one thing that I felt every time he hits second. It's like, I know Friedel sometimes we're the leadoff spot. Maybe going back to 2023, I'm trying to think through all of it. But nonetheless, maybe McLean. If Elly De La Cruz leads off an inning and gets on base, we all know inevitably probably what's going to happen. I really don't want somebody standing in front of him at second base, too many times when there's a chance for him to take second base with nobody out. So, I'm in agreement with that lead off. And that's obviously if he continues to progress and play well like anybody else. But Elly, I know he was a hot topic of conversation here of recent just because of the Nimrods that are, trying to find clicks or whatever they are doing. I don't know what they're doing, but he's a great player. And I think hopefully this city will cool the jets here a little bit. It's like, let's focus on the things that actually might matter. And it's little to nothing to do with Elly De La Cruz.
Trey, since we're talking about Elly, I'll let you chime in if you have any opinion on the podcast that Nick and I recorded last night about Elly being 8th in MVP voting and Hunter Green being 8th in Cy Young.
I'll say this, like this offseason, I've been, of course, the toxic Trace, pessimistic Trace, all those things that, everybody makes fun of. I've come to look at myself in the mirror and realize that perhaps that's the way that I kind of view these things. I want to say I don't care. And I think that's kind of how my nature is like, I don't really care what these people are voting people. It means next to nothing when it comes to my fandom. Sure, if he had an MVP type season and he finished second and I thought he deserved to finish first, maybe I would care. But as far as the whole Gordon Whitmire thing, listen, that's just what that guy does. Like that's kind of who he is. And I think he takes pride in it. And at this point, you got to kind of respect the troll. It's one of those things where if you don't know that Elly's not a better player than who was it, Ariza that he put a higher or whatever it was that I seen.
Right.
If you don't know that Elly's a better player and you're just going to literally look at his batting average and you look at his RBIs and all those things, you don't watch the game and realize that he takes bases and he makes other guys make errors and he quite literally changes the game on even things that you can't measure. And I know Nick was talking about WAR and how there's quite literally a statistic that showcases, whether you're a better baseball player than someone else. I would even argue that Elly is even beyond that. I think Elly actually changes the game more than even what that statistic can even grasp. Because guys rush pickoff attempts, guys rush throws. We see how many times Elly, for the most part, even also not to try to handicap it, but Elly also at some point would like to get a strike zone that's worth a crap. And we don't even discuss the fact that some of his strikeouts that he obtains is because for whatever reason umpires haven't adjusted the fact that he's kind of tall. I'm not trying to make excuses for Elly, but Elly's a great player. I'm not overly concerned about the fact that he finished, 8th. I'm also going to say about Hunter Green, I think it's very, very, very encouraging. The least talked about season that was the most successful was Hunter Green's from last season. And I'd also say I was very encouraged by the fact that he came back and threw at the very end of the season. If he didn't throw at the end of the season, I know people laugh at that, I would be a little skeptical heading into this season. But the fact that he was able to bounce back and showcase what he had shown already this year, eases the mind a little bit. So that's kind of my overall thoughts on just
I won't go too deep down in the weeds because this isn't certainly the primary discussion. But here's my biggest issue, and I don't have an issue with G-Dub most of the time in the troll. Trust me, if anyone understands clicks, it's Kirby Clicks over here. But here's the issue. The Colorado Rockies writers, they voted Ezekiel Tovar on their ballots because they represent Colorado. Ezekiel Tovar has absolutely no business getting MVP votes. Had a sub 300 on base percentage, 95 WRC plus, but they did it because they're representing Colorado. G-Dub represents Cincinnati, and that pisses me off that he's not accurately and fairly representing our star player. And yes, does it matter that much if Elly finishes 6th or 7th? No. I mean, it is on this baseball reference page for the rest of time. Shows you right there, MVP 8. I'd love it to say MVP 6 because the Cincinnati writer did his damn job, but it could cost him an actual MVP because this guy decides, hey, I'm going to vote him second instead of first. And like Joey Votto in 2017, it was one guy's crazy thing that did it. So I do think this matters, and it does upset me.
Maybe Gordon's playing 3D chess while you're playing checkers, Nick, and he's worried about the arbitration years for Ellie De La Cruz. So he's trying to stack the deck for the Reds. I mean, that's a hometown guy.
I could respect that.
I just put your brain in a blender for about 3 seconds.
Nick, I just sent you a link. I want to pick your brain. I know it's early and there's still a lot of decisions to be made. But today is the non-tender deadline, and I realize it's early, but maybe you even haven't been keeping track on Twitter, so that's why I sent you the link just in case. But any names that have reportedly been non-tendered already by their team stand out to you as options for the Reds moving forward?
This Ian Jabot guy would be a nice guy to get on a minor league contract. I liked Austin Hayes is interesting to me. That was one earlier today. I wouldn't like him to be option one by any means. But if the Reds did decide, maybe to go more in on a third baseman, I think Austin Hayes is a guy that would make a lot of sense for the Reds with where they're at. I haven't studied him too close, so forgive me if I'm wrong. Brian De La Cruz of the Pirates was non-tendered. He's an interesting guy to me. It depends on how much he's looking for, what kind of guarantees. He's another one. Sam Haggerty of the Mariners had a pretty good run there. I think he mashed left-handed pitchers. So he'd be a guy that might be interesting. I don't know.
Connor Capito in the chat.
Dylan Carlson was non-tendered. I don't know. It might just be my desire to stick it to the Cardinals more so than him actually being good. But Kyle Finnegan non-tendered by the Nationals.
Yeah, that was one that was mentioned in the chat by Connor Capito. Shout out to Connor for knowing ball. Kyle Finnegan non-tendered. He was projected at 8.6, though, maybe a little bit higher than they want to spend on a reliever, given the money that they have tied up. But yeah, some interesting names nonetheless, and some more names I'm sure that will be added to this list before the deadline, which I believe is midnight Eastern. So, 8 p.m. Eastern. So should be at that point where even more non-tendered names should be breaking and coming through. But you mentioned it. I guess the two other pieces of news we've touched on Santiago Espinal a lot, but Ian Jabot non-tendered by the Reds today. Nick, you just mentioned that it would be good to get him on a minor league deal. You think that's realistic given coming off an injury last year?
Yeah, it just depends on the Reds would know really where he's at. And it didn't feel like he was still right at the end of the year. It felt like they were kind of not forcing him, but they were really trying to push him back to get a couple chances in the big leagues to help make this decision. And he actually looked better in the major leagues than he looked in the minor leagues, because he looked really bad every time he had a rehab game that I watched. He looked awful. Kind of was able to get through a couple decent appearances with the Reds, but yeah, I mean, if everything's fine, I'd be all for Jabot. I think Jabot was a nice pitcher. But again, the fact that they non-tendered him, I'm speculating here because he wasn't really expected to make that much money, Craig. The fact that they non-tendered him makes me think that there's something else that we don't know about with his health.
Sorry, E-Train is begging for a smile, so I had to give him a little smile in the video. Hope you guys don't mind. Trace, final thoughts? Where are you now that you've had an hour or so to digest a little bit? Anything that we didn't talk about yet that you want to chat about?
No, final thoughts is I'm going to go through this offseason with try to even-keeled attitude. I'm not going to get overly over the moon about Candelario type signings, and I'm also not going to undervalue maybe Santiago Espinal signings. I'm just going to let it play out. I'll be excited for March, yes. I just hope that they go out and get an outfield bat. If they don't do that, then I can't really defend the front office like I have in the past. But maybe they'll be right, and one of those guys will figure it out that we've all said they were going to figure it out for a long time. But they got money to spend, and the last thing I'll say is like not to get too deep in the weeds of the payroll and the salary cap, or not the salary cap, the lack of a salary cap, et cetera. But I'm not going to throw a parade if the Reds decide to spend what they spent last year, regardless of TV deal or not. They have to know deep down whether or not they have the same amount of revenue that they're going to get here soon. And I don't see why it would change a whole lot. Like, if Bally Sports didn't want to get rid of the Reds, if they didn't drop, I guess my point is like from a business perspective, if they didn't drop the Reds immediately like they had of some other franchises, and the Reds were actually one of the markets that they were doing okay in, I like to think that the Reds shouldn't be losing that much revenue from the TV deal, despite who they go with. And I floated out the idea of them doing it on their own. I knew deep down that was probably, too little, maybe a little too progressive. But I still think that they're going to have to find unique ways to bring in revenue. And I think it's an excellent opportunity that still exists for them to try to figure out a way to kind of create their own stuff. And even if, I know it sounds crazy, but like, even if they did like a whole extra thing that isn't even a part of the, TV package as far as the games go, even if they created their own, like I said, paywall that had BP cams and bullpen cams during the game, stupid stuff that, like, there would be a decent amount of people that would be interested enough to pay. Like, that's might not be a ton of money, but it's something. And we'll see if the Reds can continue to find ways to be competitive. I think that's the biggest concern I have moving forward as a fan is like, are these small market teams going to find a way to be competitive to the big markets? Because ultimately, I know we all made fun of the Dodgers and we made fun of the Yankees and all those teams for not being able to get out of the first round from time to time. But if they put a stretch of baseball together where, they're dominating this league, then it sucks. I don't know how else to say it. I hate to be like that on my final thoughts, but that's where I'm at.
Brady Singer in 2024, 32 starts, 179.2 and 2/3 innings pitched, 170 strikeouts, a whip of 1.27, ERA 3.71. Nick, the thing that stands out to me a little bit as I kind of dive into this is Brady Singer was in the 79th percentile in ground ball rate, got a ground ball in nearly 50% of his outs last year. Seems like the type of pitcher that would be successful in Great American Ballpark, no?
Yeah, I've never really bought into the have to be a ground ball pitcher versus not. I think you can kind of maybe find pitchers that aren't as good if you're focusing on ground balls. The fact that Singer's just been an effective pitcher for multiple years in a row. The fact that he's made 32 starts last year. I mean, the Reds don't have anyone. Hunter Green 26, I think, is the most of anyone, and it just goes lower and lower and lower. So just the fact that you knock on wood, have that reliability. But, my final thought is this. I mean, the Reds have some really, really good pitching. It's still maybe not as deep as I still would even like it in the minor leagues. But in terms of like your 1 through 6 right now, it's as deep as I can remember in a long time. Green, Lodolo, Abbott, Singer, Lauder, Martinez. Remember the 2012 Reds won 97 games. Did not have a great offense. They had really 2 good hitters, Ludwig and Votto. Everyone else was pretty average. Frazier came in and was above average, but that offense was not great. Their defense was a lot better. But you can win with pitching, and the Reds have the pitching. It's going to be important for guys like Burns, maybe Ashcraft, Chase Petty, Connor Phillips to provide that next wave of depth, because those guys will still need to be used at some point. Maybe even throw Carson Spires into that mix as well.
Michael Rolfe wanted to send us off with another super chat, $10 this time. He said, Zebra here to make us all feel guilty. Talking heads, we're talking about giving truth serum to Cincy athletes. If you could ask any of the following athletes a question, which would you ask? Or what would you ask them? Terry Francona, Ellie, or Hunter Green? So, Nick, if let's say that Reds Fest was happening this year and you had a credential again to interview one of those three people, who would you interview and what would you ask?
No, it'd have to be Francona. I mean, no humble brag. I already interviewed, on Green, so no, I mean, Francona would give you, like, I feel like the realest answers too. Like he doesn't like have like the press ready. Like he doesn't show up with his binder. Trace knows what I'm talking about with his talking points ready to go. No, I mean, I think it'd be fun, and I'd want to ask him. My first question would be, "What are you doing with Nick Martinez this year?" Because that would be, I think, the most interesting, and then go from there.
Trace,
I'd ask Ellie.
I
think it's easy for me. I'd ask Ellie a simple question, and as long as he tells me the truth, it'd be good. And I'd ask him if the Reds have come knocking on his door, and if there's any interest at all. And I think I still hold this to this day. I really do think that we gotta capitalize on an opportunity that exists right now. That is Ellie De La Cruz is on our team, and the fact that I haven't really even heard. Maybe it'll come out of the blue that he's signed an extension. And I know people think I'm absolutely crazy for always talking about it, but I just think if they got through this offseason and nothing's really even discussed about an extension with Ellie, I just think that it is what it is. And I'm not trying to be too overly pessimistic about it. I just want to know the answer. And I hope the Reds do know the answer. That's all. Certainly
would be nice to have to do another emergency edition of Chatterbox Reds if Ellie De La Cruz was extended. What, Nick? You got more breaking news or
no? Worth mentioning. Poor Jonathan India is in Italy right now on vacation.
There was his wife posted a picture on Instagram though yesterday of him, and he was like on his phone, right? So
yeah.
People were speculating that maybe he was finding out that he was going to the Royals on X.com, but
wasn't Votto like in Italy or somewhere when they let him know that obviously they weren't going to do the $20 million?
I think he was in like Iceland or something.
He was somewhere crazy. Anyway, go ahead, Craig.
No, I mean, open it up to you two for any final thoughts if you have anything else before I wrap this up.
That's it.
I'm good.
All right. Well, look, I mean, we had over 400 people in this stream for most of the night. And again, we say it a lot, but like literally, what now, Nick?
I'm sorry. I do have to. No. This is a serious one. And I know Craig will appreciate this. I have to shout out my wife. I was getting ready to put the kids to bed and abandoned ship to come down here to talk to you. So no, I should definitely give major kudos to my wife, who always allows me to do stuff like this and chat with you. Sorry, Greg. I thought that was a worthwhile interruption.
Pro tip, Nick. Let's lead the show with that next time. All right.
Well, there's a lot going on.
I was literally putting my shoes on to take my daughter to dinner because my wife doesn't feel great. So I'm with you. I'll be sure to thank her once I get downstairs because we know she's not watching. Andrea might actually be watching. My wife is definitely not. But look, obviously tonight, and there's Fergie. Obviously tonight's a great example of it, but be sure to stay tuned to Chatterbox Sports all year long for the latest in Cincinnati sports talk. Chatterbox Reds with Nick and Trace after every single Reds home game. I'll fill in where needed, and we'll be live with you anytime news breaks all offseason long. Off the Bench with Justin Kinner and the gang airs Monday through Friday, 10 a to 12 p. Chatterbox Bengals, Tuesday at 6 p.m., Thursdays at 7 p.m., and live during and after every single game all year long. Chatterbox Bengals, Charlie and the guys come to you after every single Bearcats football and men's basketball game. All of this and more can be found on the Chatterbox Sports YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So for Nick Kirby, Trace Fowler, I'm Craig Sandlin. We appreciate all of you for tuning in. It's been a great night and a great day to be a Cincinnati Reds fan, and we look forward to many more bright days ahead. Have a good night.